Okay, are we live now? Yes.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, hello, everybody.
Hi.
So here we are today doing an interview with Julia Lynn Rubin, who's the author of Trouble Girls. I have it right here.
Yay! Oh my gosh, it looks so cool in someone else's hands. I love it.
I
have it invisibly.
Oh, I know.
On my laptop.
I can see the invisible copy.
Yeah. We're also here with Luna from Books, Lattes, and Journaling. I'm not pointing the right way.
Oh, it's so hard, I know.
And so we just have some questions to ask. If anybody has any questions, you can probably ask them. My dog is making noises.
Oh, so that's what they do. Dogs are always making noises at the wrong moment.
So, you know.
They have no concept of broadcasts.
No. Okay. Let me just, so you have questions here. Okay. Luna, do you have the questions pulled up or?
Yeah, I have the questions.
Okay. I guess I'll go first.
Okay.
We just have a list.
I'm just trying to find my arc. Oh, I found it. Here it is. I have it on my Kindle.
Yay, it's the virtual version. I love it. I love that we have the paperback version and the virtual version.
Yeah.
Best of both worlds.
Okay, so I guess I'll just start here. So what is your favorite part about writing?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. That's an opener. I think my favorite part about writing is that it lets me explore feelings and experiences and fictionalize them and kind of just experience those things through fiction and express thoughts and feelings I have that are really hard to explain in like a dreamlike fictional way. So I love the self-expression aspect of it, I guess is the best way I could make that make sense. But I love how it just is a release for me. And there's something very freeing about writing. And it also, like, I've always been in love with words and I've always been fascinated by words and stories. So it just kind of comes to me sometimes and it feels good to like get it down. So I'd say that's my favorite thing.
Luna, do you want to ask a question?
Oh, sure. How did you choose the characters' names? That's the question. I was wondering that the whole time. I love their names.
Oh, thank you. So I don't know if you've seen the original Thelma and Louise.
I have not.
So their names are Trixie and Lux because Thelma and Louise, T and H.
Yeah.
But I wanted to come up with my own names. And I like the idea of Trixie because it's almost like a pejorative a little bit for like a ditzy girl or like a girl who's, you know, and I thought that would be kind of an interesting, ironic name for her. And I just really like that name. It almost sounds like such a like small town name. And then Lux actually means light. And so I thought that would be, because she's such a light. And I like the X's. And I just really liked those names. And I thought they worked well together. They were unique enough that because I feel like if their names were like Sarah and Becky, you know, like it would be a little more generic, but I wanted to give them Thelma and Louise names. Yeah. I like weird names. Not that they're super weird, but I like unique names for my characters.
Yeah. Okay. If you could tell your younger self anything, what would it be?
If I could what? Sorry.
Tell your younger self anything, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question too. I would tell my younger self, like, you're going to be okay. Like, you got this. Like, you don't hate yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. Don't, you know, you're going to go through things that you can't even foresee yet, but like you can deal with it and you're stronger, more powerful than you think. So I would try to impart like maternal wisdom to my younger self.
Yeah.
Because I still struggle with those things that I struggled with when I was a teenager. And I think that's part of why I really like YA so much, because I relate so much to my teenage self. But I would be like, you got this. You're beautiful. You're amazing. Like, just hang in there.
I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, do you want to go next, Lorelai, for the next question?
Yeah. Any book recommendations?
Yes. So if you want, let me think. Every time someone asks me book recommendations, my mind goes completely blank. It's like when they're like, "What's your favorite song?" And suddenly I have no idea what any music is. In terms of, this is an adult book actually, but it's really beautiful and it's arguably like a feminist novel. But it's called Betty by Tiffany McDaniel, and it's gorgeous. Yeah, it's amazing. And it's so immersive. And if you like really like beautiful, rich prose and like writing that just sucks you in and characters that feel like your family, like that book I highly recommend. It is a very disturbing book. It's adult fiction, but and there's some scenes in it that like have stuck with me. But it's based on the author's family, her author's grandmother's story. And it takes place in Ohio, and it's in a fictional town, but it's really beautiful. Book recommendations in terms of YA, let me think. I mean, I'm going to plug my friend Sophie's books, Perfect on Paper by Sophie Gonzalez. That's a really great one. That came out this year, and I actually read and helped her revise an earlier draft of that. And it has amazing rep. The main character is bisexual, and she likes a guy and a girl. And she's like dealing with, am I queer enough? Am I valid? And like, it's really funny and cute and clever. So I would definitely recommend those books. One's a little more intense. One's a little more intense. And then Perfect on Paper is, it's light, but it's also, Sophie does a really great job of dealing with heavier topics. She wrote Only Mostly Devastated. So she does, I don't know if you read it. It's so good, but she like,
I've heard of it.
Yeah, so she does this. She's like probably my best friend and my best author friend. So she deals really well with like heavy topics, but in a way that's like accessible, and there's humor and there's like joy. She's really. So I would recommend those books.
Kat likes the Only Mostly Devastated one.
I know it's a little bit of a tongue twister sometimes.
Yeah. She's Kat has raved about that one a lot.
Yeah. I saw the video on it.
Yeah.
It's that book just like was everywhere. I was so proud of her. And so we're actually with the same publisher with Wednesday Books.
Okay.
Yeah. So short. Yeah. And but Perfect on Paper is like, I told her, I was like, Sophie, this is your best book so far. When I read an early draft, you definitely got to read it.
I just placed a hold on it. It's like 10 weeks, but I will get it.
Oh my gosh. It's so popular. 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Good job, Sophie. She's like she's like killing it.
Yeah, you can ask a question, Luna. I was,
Oh, okay. What did you edit out of your book? I always like asking authors this question.
What did I edit out of Trouble Girls?
Yeah.
Oh wow, I edited a lot. So, as you probably know this, but like, the final draft is so different from the first draft. I actually edited out a prologue that I wrote that I really, really liked. And I think it was my editor who was like, you don't need this. It's superfluous. But it was very like aesthetic and cool. And it was like, let me take you to the beginning and tell you what happens. I always knew this girl would be trouble, which is why in the beginning of the ARC, I always knew this girl would be trouble. That's one of the lines from the prologue that was cut. I also cut some subplots. I cut an early scene where Trixie and Lux go to a little river and they see like the effects of global warming on their town. And there's like, they see the way that the bugs have started to die. And like, it's kind of like this sad, but then they see a little turtle that like swims and Trixie, I think it was Trixie who says something like, oh, I think she's going to be okay. She's going to like find her way. And I also cut another subplot. I have all these deleted scenes. I should probably at some point just like release them, be like, here's some deleted scenes. But I had this memory scene where Lux has a boyfriend and it's like winter in Blue Bottle. And it was very like, it was a contrast to the heat. Because originally the book was set in summer, but my editor wanted it to be in spring. So I had to like shift it a tiny bit. But yeah, and that was a really cool scene where Trixie was like watching them throw snowballs at each other and just like jealous and having all these confusing feelings. And so those are a few of the things I definitely cut and changed quite a bit. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to cut stuff because you're like, no one's ever going to see this. And I loved this scene. But then you just repurpose it for another book.
What are your hardest scenes to write, and how do you push through them?
That's a good question. My hardest things to write are... I would say I have a hard time writing the middle section of books. I write out of sequence, out of order. And I often know the end before I know what happens in the middle. I often write the end like months before I write a lot of, because I like to know where I'm going. I would say that I have trouble writing scenes that I feel like lag or don't go anywhere per se, or I have to put together like point A to point C, and get there. And I push through that by just sort of, sometimes I outline, which really helps. And then I just kind of write a bunch of different versions of it. But I also find it very difficult to write scenes that are personal and emotional, even though it's like a release, it still can be very hard to get that on. Like it feels good in a way to get it on the page, but it also like makes me cry, and it's like therapy writing that scene. I just think in general writing is really hard. I don't know. Do you both write? Do you do creative writing?
I'm currently writing I'm Mexican, so I wanted to write like a Romeo and Juliet retelling.
Oh, I
made it sapphic, and it's on rival ranches in Mexico.
Okay.
And they're both witches, and I'm very excited to write it.
I can already think of like all these agents who are like, "Oh my god, give that to me now." That is such a great concept. I love that.
Thank you.
Please keep working on that.
Yeah, I have like ideas for books in my head. I just haven't written them down yet. I have this one that I'm really starting to focus on. When I was younger, it was 7, 8, 9 maybe. We live in Maine, and so we would drive past places with a lot of like fog and stuff. And my dad used to joke that they were the mist spirits.
Ooh,
and
I love that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day, and I'm like, I want to put that into a book, like some sapphic book.
Yes.
I want to put it in there.
Oh, like a sapphic ghost story almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Because that's what that's mainly what I read. So like, I think about that a lot. Like, people come to me if they want queer book recommendations.
Yeah,
like I got
you read them all.
Yeah, I got an email the other day from this girl. She was like, "I heard you read a lot of LGBTQ plus books. Can you give me some recommendations?" And I'm like, "Sure."
Oh, that's so flattering. You're like, okay, like I know.
She recommended Trouble Girls.
Oh, I'm gonna cry because the book's not officially out yet. So the fact that people have read it is like mind blowing to me.
Yeah, I did have like I put it in the notes. I was like, "Hey, this comes out June 1st," but like it was good.
Thank you.
Like I was like, but it's a good book.
Yeah.
It's like Trouble Girls just means so much to me. I loved it so much.
Oh, thank you so much. See, like that's like the reason I love to write YA is like I love when people come to me and are like, "I loved your book. It meant something to me. Like it spoke to me." I'm like, it's an incredible feeling. So you better finish your book so you can have the same experience when you publish it. Thank you. Yeah, writing in general is just really hard. It's so hard.
Like you don't want to do it, and then
it feels like a chore. It often feels like a chore.
Yeah.
And also writing to market is really hard. When you're writing, there's something really pure and beautiful about not being in the publishing business because you can just work on your craft. You can write whatever you want. Your ideas are just completely yours. But when you're in the business, you have to think about like, what's a concept and what will sell and what can I pitch and and it takes some of the joy out of writing, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge. And I didn't mention, but my next book that comes out next year was very challenging to write because I wrote it during the height of COVID.
Right.
And I was like really depressed. And I also, I had trouble. The idea was mine, but it was like something I had pitched to my editors or my editor and people at Wednesday, and they had changed it, and it didn't 100% feel like my idea at that point. So I had to really kind of come up with a way to make it mine.
Yeah.
And that often happens in publishing, where you don't just write what you really want to write. Sometimes you have to write to brand. You have to write to market.
Yeah.
You might have a really passion project, and your agent or editor might say like, well, let's save that one because we want your next book to be more like this one. So it's that is definitely a difficult part of writing in publishing.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of segue off of that because one of the questions I have down here is, are you working on anything at the moment that you can share? So
I sure am. So I don't know how much I can share about. I'll just share as much as I want. It's fine. My next book comes out 2022, either in the summer or fall, depending on the schedule. It is a sapphic horror at a summer camp, and there's a secret society, and it's very, very dark. It's actually, I would say, Trouble Girls is very dark, but I would say this book is more violent. It's a horror. It's almost like, have you seen Midsummer?
I think I have.
I've heard of it.
It's so good. It's so creepy. I mean, there's elements of that. There's a lot of like horror movie references in it, and but that's coming out sometime next year. But I'm also working on the book after that, so I'm actually coming up with ideas for the book that I'm going to write after that, and I'm going to talk to my agent about it soon. So I'm coming up with like 4 or 6 ideas for another book, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what she thinks is good and what sticks. So when you're an author, you're always writing the next book. Like even if your book comes out June 1st, people are like, oh, your book came out, and you're like, I wrote that so long ago. I've been working on like 6 books since. Like, it's really odd because it's like Trouble Girls is something that I've had finished for a while. So I'm like, oh yeah, that book.
I was reading Jason June's book, Jay's Gay Agenda, and he incorporated a line in the book, and it was like, we can Skype like we did in Corona quarantine. So it like took place after coronavirus, and I was just like,
whoa, that is so mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I've talked to some authors about like, how are we going to handle COVID? Are we going to mention it in the books? And I'm personally just going to do an universe where COVID never happened, because I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to, like, it's so upsetting for me that I just don't want it to be part of my fiction. But it's going to be really interesting because we're going to have some books that talk about it and some books that like never happened. It's weird with Trouble Girls too, because it theoretically couldn't have happened last year. So it's like it had to have happened like either the year before or like in the future.
When we really talk about that, it makes me think of Love, Victor, which is a Hulu TV series.
Oh yeah, based on Bertelli's book.
Mm-hmm. It's like the spin-off of whatever.
It's a spin-off of Love, Simon.
And in one scene, one of the characters goes like, "Oh, it's 2020," and it's like, spring 2020, and I'm like,
and you're like, "Oh, I know."
I was sitting there, and at the time I was in quarantine, and I'm like, so none of this would have actually happened, but
it's so weird. It's an alternative universe. It's so bizarre. And I know, and it's like, I feel so bad for all the authors whose books came out last year, because it was hard in general with publishing, but it was also like, you'd be reading them and you'd be like,
I heard so many.
Like, I'm just going to go to Hawaii with my family in March. And you're like, oh, that didn't happen.
We were planning to like just cancel Christmas and go to Hawaii, and that did not happen.
Oh, yeah. But at the same time, I'm kind of glad people had books to escape all of that and just kind of pretend like it wasn't happening, because we heard about it constantly on the news and everything. And so books really helped get me through a lot of, I don't know about you both, but like books help. And I don't want to read about COVID. I really don't. I don't want to ever read about it.
I didn't like March of last year. It wasn't, because we were all of a sudden, we were online and I could not handle it. I have ADHD, and so it drove me crazy. And I'm even horrible still now. Like, we know what we're doing now at school, and I still can't handle doing it online. It just there's so many distractions. I'm like, I do so much better in school.
Oh yeah. I don't think school is supposed to be online. I feel like this is just like a last resort kind of emergency situation, but you're not alone. There's so many people who can't do it online.
Yeah, especially because like I can't be on meds because the meds give me terrible side effects. Mm-hmm. So like they give me side effects that I should not be having. You know, there's like the normal side effects, but then the side effects I was getting was like, you know, it was like, you know, very like my heart would be like racing whenever I took it. I'm like, that's not good. So it's like, you know, like, talk to your doctor if this happens. And I'm like, great.
You're like, it's all happening. And you're like, I'm supposed to be taking medicine to feel better, not worse. Like when the side effects are so bad, you're like, is it medicine now or is it just making me sick? No, that's awful. Yeah, I really feel bad for everyone in school. Like I cannot imagine. I feel so fortunate that I got high school, college, grad school done before the pandemic.
I feel so bad. Like, obviously, I felt bad for, like, seniors and stuff last year.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
But I feel so bad for seniors this year because at least seniors last year got, like, half of their year. They got one last homecoming and whatever.
True.
But, like, this year, they get nothing. The only thing that seniors at my school are getting is an outdoor prom, which it's the middle of April in Maine. And, like, the weather is so bipolar here.
It's like you never know if it's gonna rain or like storm. And the other thing I think that's really hard for seniors is they're like, well, should I go to college? Does it matter? Like, are there jobs for me? Is the economy gonna be like? They're like, what are we gonna do next? Like, everything they thought they were gonna do got derailed, and it's so sad. I also feel really bad for really younger kids who are trying to learn online because they just. That's not for younger kids.
I have younger cousins, and like, you know, it's hard for them, and like even it was hard for I'm a sophomore right now, and even it's hard for me because I'm like, well, next year it just seems like everything's going by so fast, and I'm like, I don't know how things are gonna be once I get up into college levels. Even then, and I'm like, how are things gonna be for certain things, and I can't, you know.
Yeah. What about you, Luna? How are you dealing with everything?
I feel like when we got back to school, our teachers expected us to transition just so well, so they kept everything at the same pace. Before, so my algebra class, we were going through 5 lessons a day so we could catch up to what we would have done. Yeah, it was intense, and
that's
like teachers,
so intense.
Yeah. Teachers are like, oh, mental health isn't a thing. Keep working, like blah 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 blah.
Right. They're like, this is the only class you're taking, right?
Yeah. I'm like, oh no, I have like, I was like, ugh.
Yeah, they do that in college too. If you go to college, like it's gonna be.
My school is struggling even more now because we're having budget cuts, and they want to cut things for special education.
Oh no.
In English, but their goals for like the next 4 years are increased graduation rates and better literacy.
Good luck with
English and special ed positions.
Okay.
And the poor kids there. You know, I had a girl walking to the class the other day, and they're like, so they're cutting, you know, this teacher, and she's like the only reason my mental health exists. Like, that sucks for you. I'm like, oh my god.
So many teachers quit. So many teachers across the country quit because they were like, I can't risk my life, or I can't do this, or it's not. And the kids all suffered because those teachers are so vital.
It's so devastating for my school too because they're cutting more staff members. And last year, we lost 2 staff members, like very beloved staff members. One of them was so sudden. He was 40. He was my mom's age, and all of a sudden he just had like sodium issues. One of them we kind of knew he was dying, but like it's still, I mean, that doesn't make it any less sad, but we were like, you know, we know it's coming, but this guy, it was just so sudden.
That's so scary. It's so disturbing when like people in your community die too. It's like it's just like, it's suddenly not a news story. It's like, whoa, it's real. That's so sad. I'm so sorry. It's like you feel it. The whole community feels it. The whole school feels it. And especially when you can't be together in person.
Oh, yeah.
To comfort each other. It's like, it's really creepy. We've been living in a bad sci-fi movie.
Yeah. I remember keep going, sorry.
it wasn't, you know what, it really, there was an Instagram advertisement that I kept seeing. This was months ago, and it was for some movie or something, where it was like, you know, Corona had evolved into this bigger thing, and I'm like, excuse me, and like a bunch of people, they're like, yeah, stay inside, and like a bunch of people were dying. It was like this it was like this apocalyptic world, and I'm like, excuse me, who thought this was a good idea?
I think I saw that trailer. It was like that sci-fi movie. I think it actually might be coming out soon.
Yeah, and I sat there and watched it, and I was like, who thought it was a good idea to make a you know, apocalypse movie out of the virus we're currently in? Because that's not funny.
Maybe in like 30 years. Like, let's give it a minute. Like, yeah. Hey, Luna, what were you gonna say?
Oh, there was like, for the first week of coronavirus, there was a movie that was trending. Was it Quarantine? It was like a movie from the 1980s, and my dad made me watch it, and I was like, why are we watching
Oh my
this?
God. You're like, Dad, we're in it right now. I don't want to watch the movie about what we're in.
Yeah, it was like this tiny town.
I remember there was
infected by monkeys, I think.
There was
like the whole town got infected.
Outbreak? Was it Outbreak?
Yeah. Oh yeah, Outbreak. Yeah. There we go.
I actually ironically watched that in middle school, and it really scared me. Like, they made us watch it in science class for some reason. Maybe they knew, you know, maybe they're trying to prepare us, but it was really scary. But it's funny because in that movie, like, the things they did to, like, as I remember it, the things they did to protect people, they just did not do it all now. They were like, okay, we got to shut everything down. We got to go into actual quarantine. Here they were like, well, it's fine.
I think about that a lot. Because I have family members who are just, I think they're terrible. I'm like, I'm nice to them, but I'm like, I don't actually like you.
Yeah. So that's so normal. Everyone's got, people in their family they dislike.
When I talk to my friends about my dad's side of the family, they know it's not going to be something happy. Because I'm like, you know, they're all horrible and bigots, and I'm like, I don't like you.
Yeah.
Like, what makes you think I'm gonna like you? Right. And I'm like, I don't know what makes, and you know, I have this one cousin who goes around telling people, she claims that, you know, she's like, I was cured of my homosexuality. And I'm like, you go around telling me I can tell you anything. And I'm like, but if I tell you that I'm gay, you're gonna be like, no.
Oh, I feel very bad for her. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I'm like, I can't, you know, and that made me, I think I was thinking about my family a lot, kind of when I was reading this book and thinking about Lux's dad in certain lines. I was like, oh, you know, they kind of, you know, it was very weird.
Yeah, he's because like I if I remember, it's funny, like I can sometimes not remember what happens in my own book, but he said about her little brother, he's just like, I don't want him to act gay or turn gay. I was actually based on comments a relative of mine said about one of my cousins, and it stuck with me. Yeah, and I was just like, it was so upsetting, and I was like, I'm gonna put this in the book.
Yeah. See, when I think of my family, I have two very opposite sides when I think of my mom's side and my dad's side. And so, like, my mom's side, they don't care. They're like, whatever, you know? And then my dad's side is just so, you know, they're not,
they're very prejudiced.
They're very prejudiced, and they were, you know, it's just, you know, it's sometimes scary to me to,
it is scary.
And I'm like, you know, you think you're gonna get to see me after I'm 18, but you're most likely not, because I don't really want to be around you.
And that's fair. And you shouldn't, you know, that's the thing about too, is like often found family is so vital, especially as you get older. And I know for me, like, I mean, I'm close with my parents, even though we have our own issues, like they're very accepting, but I found that especially when you're queer, it's like your chosen family is everything. And as the beautiful thing is when you're an adult, you really get to just pick them. And like my community that I have here in New York City, like, is incredible. Yeah. And they're
still want to move
like
to New York.
my blood.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Oh, I said I really want to move to New York when I get older for college.
Where do you want to go?
I want to go to NYU for college.
You should. I have actually friends that are freshmen at NYU right now. And they love it. I mean, it's really hard with the hybrid classes and stuff, but I think things are going to be better next year. By the time, I'm not sure what grade you're in, but by the time you go to college, it should be fine. But NYU is a great school. I actually did a summer writing program there back in 2010. I was there and I lived in the dorms, and it made me want to get my MFA, which is eventually what I did. And I loved it. And I think New York City is one of those places that if you're a city person, you're a city person. You just know it when you're here.
It is. Like my dad is not a city person. That's the one thing I know about my dad. And I'm like, I want to be a city person. I want to do theater there.
Yeah.
And that's what I like doing. And I'm like, it's fun for me. And I also like writing. And I'm like, that's where I want to be.
It's such an artist city. And like, it's interesting because with COVID, there was a big exodus. There was like a mass exodus of people called like transplants, which is like not the nicest thing to say, but they would leave. And a lot of them were people that would come in just for a few years to like work a corporate job or at a startup. And then they would probably move to the suburbs. And a lot of them left. And that was both good and bad because it hurt the economy a lot, which then hurt the working class. But it also made rent prices drop a lot.
Right.
Our population dipped. And 2019 was the most crowded. I've lived in New York City for almost 10 years, and it's the most crowded I'd ever seen. It was so overpopulated. And it was just, I feel like there's been good and bad to that. And like people leaving has kind of made it easier for people to move to parts of Brooklyn that they couldn't before, or Manhattan. And things are more affordable and there's more space. And so as an artist, you need that space. And before it was like impossible unless you were making like a lot of money. But yes, come to NYU. I hope you get in.
I am so excited.
Is that like your top? That was actually my top school when I was in high school. I didn't.
I feel like as a kid, the like dream is to go to Harvard, but I was like, no, NYU just
that was me.
More like something.
What do you want to? Do you know what you want to study?
I want to do photography and engineering, and I want to do photography, political science.
See, for me,
wait, are you gonna triple major?
I think no. I just want to do political science and photography, and that's it.
I love that.
This is even a bigger thing for me right now because I am a sophomore in high school, and so coming up to junior year, it's like college. I'm like, I'm doing community college first, but
honestly,
whatever.
It doesn't matter. You don't even have to go to college. Like, it's really a choose your own adventure game. Like, especially in my generation, we were told all the time, like, if you don't go to college, you'll have no future. And now we're like saddled with debt, and we're like, we still can't find jobs, and so we're like, okay. But honestly, whether you want to go to college or trade school or just get in the field, it doesn't matter. Like, it's whatever you want to do. And community college is a great option because, especially if you want to start there, because you save so much money. It's like you get just as good of an education, and then you can when you get your degree, if you're only there for 2 years, you get the same diploma. So if you transfer from community college to like Princeton, you still get a Princeton diploma. And it's like half the price.
I was even looking at community colleges in New York, and I was like, there was like 9 minutes away from kind of like where I would want to live. I was like, and then I was looking at bookstores and how far they are.
Oh, New York has so many bookstores. Like, there's hundreds here. I think there's a lot.
So kind of going off of that, we have a couple more questions. How did you choose the title for this book?
That is also a good question. So I really was thinking about the term troubled girls, and I was like, these girls are troubled and they're trouble. And then my first concept, like I had this vision of the cover where it would say troubled girls and then you'd cross off the D. But like, you can't design your own cover. And then I just was like, trouble girls. Like, I thought it was just, it kind of invoked everything I was trying to say, and it's really funny because at the time I didn't realize how many YA novels had girls at the end.
Yeah.
Like, hello girls, the good luck girls, this girls, and I was like, oh, that wasn't my thing. But they all kind of started to come out around the time I was thinking of the book. But yeah, I just thought it was both troubled, and they are trouble, and they're in trouble.
Yeah.
So it's like there's many meanings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to say and remember. And I just think you can be like, be a trouble girl, which is what I write in my like autographed ARCs.
Yeah. I was just thinking about this. Are there any books that like you've read that made you cry? Because this book at the end made me cry.
Oh my gosh. It made you cry?
Yes.
I'm honored. I am really honored.
Yeah.
It was
because
I mean, okay, it was like 2 a.m. in the morning.
Uh-huh.
But you know, whatever. I wanted to I sat down that day and was like, I need to finish this book now because I'm so close. And so I sat down, and it may have been 2 a.m., but it still made me cry. So, you know.
Oh my gosh. Did it make you feel like, what did it make you feel that do you think that made you cry at the end?
It was just, I guess I was just very emotional because, like, you know, I knew it was coming to an end, and I'd felt like I was on this journey with both of them.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was kind of like, you know, there was a certain scene I'd read earlier in the night where I was, like, sitting there, and I'm like, oh my God, you guys need to get out of there.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love that. So many books have made me cry. I cry at like a lot of things. Like I'll cry at commercials sometimes if I'm in a certain mood, and they hit me the right way. But one of the first books that made me cry, like sob my eyes out. I forget the author's name, but it's called Zink. It's Zink, and it's a middle grade novel, I believe, about a girl that has leukemia. And so she's in the hospital and she's so sick. And in order to deal with her like trauma of being in the hospital, she goes into this fantasy world where she has like zebra friends. And that book made me just like I was sobbing. I remember being in my bedroom, just like bawling my eyes out. Betty by Tiffany McDaniel made me cry quite a few times. I'm actually reading The Book Thief right now. And that book has made me cry. I'm Jewish, so like it's about like Nazi Germany and the Holocaust, and so anything about that will probably make me cry because it's like very personal.
You know, I was sitting in my room, and I'm in an English class that's called Global Issues, and so it's reading books from people around the world. We've read A Long Way Gone by Ishmael Bea. That was a good book, actually. I liked that one.
I've heard of that one. I heard that one was good.
It's like, you know, it's like a memoir, and like, you know, it made me sad because I'm like, we never even heard about this. I don't remember, you know, you don't learn about this. And then the last one we read was Night by Eli Wiesel.
Oh, that one's rough.
That one's rough because it is very rough because it's like, you know, it's detailed description. And I'm like, and you know, my teacher is sitting there being like, you have to get the sad stuff to get to the funny things. And I'm like, the funny things? She's like, the funny book.
That's an interesting take on a Holocaust memoir.
Like, she's not, I mean.
I was like, what's
it was
funny
like
Night?
the funny book. She wasn't saying that the book was funny. She was sitting there like, you know, she would.
I got it. Now I thought you meant the funny bits. I was like,
you like what? I was confused at that first. I was like, wait, the funny bits in this book about the Holocaust?
I know.
But we're reading next. I think it's Born Illegal by Trevor Noah.
Oh, and that's new. That must obviously a new one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's probably Trevor's really funny, like, so that one's light.
Yeah. You know, this next one is by a stand-up comedian, so you know, you gotta
raid the dark to get to the light. I've also read there's a Holocaust memoir called All But My Life. Very, very disturbing.
I read a book earlier in the year for my book club that we have at school. And it's actually, I found it really interesting because it wasn't like a book that took place during the Holocaust. It was post-Holocaust. It was called They Went Left.
Oh, I've heard of this book.
Yeah, it was a post-Holocaust book, and you never see books like that. Like,
it was the first dealing with the aftermath,
after
the generational trauma, and like the way people, even survivors, like
And so,
I
like,
remember, yeah.
It starts out in a concentration camp, but they're like, I can't quite remember. Like, I only read like halfway through, and then we moved on to a different book. I'm like, I need to read this, but like, I wasn't reading fast enough, so I was like, we'll read it next. I'll read it, some other time, and that, it made me, yeah.
Yeah, so, for me, any book about war, whatever war it is, whatever, no matter where, or just a really disturbing period in history, I always cry. Or a book about family that's really intense and touching, like that. Those make me cry.
A book that made me. This one was also one I was introduced to in book club, but this was last year when it was the breakfast book club. We don't get to be inside the school earlier before the bell rings in the morning now, so we've had to change.
Oh, really? Oh, right, because of
yeah. But Darius the Great is Not Okay is a really good
I've
one
heard
about
of that
family.
one.
And I remember the English teacher who runs it with the librarian, she's a family friend. And we were sitting there, and I was at her house that night for whatever reason. We didn't really need a reason. She's a family friend, so we're there a lot. And we were talking about it, and there's this part, and basically the premise of this first book is that he's going to see his grandfather in Iran who has a brain tumor, and you kind of know that this is the first and last time he's going to see his grandfather, and it's really sad because they leave knowing that this is the last time they're going to see it.
Those books always get me.
Yeah,
those books are always so hard.
I'm like, I'm like,
it's like that dread, that anticipation of death. Oh, and then there's that other book. What is it? It's a middle grade novel. It's, oh my God, it's Patrick Ness. It's about grief. It's so good. Wait, I'm gonna Google it really quickly because it's a really good book. See, it's called Monster Calls. And oh my God, that book, I read that in grad school for like one of my writing for children courses, and that book I read it in like a day, and I had to keep taking breaks because it was so sad, because it's about this, I think it's about this boy dealing with his mother's death. And it takes you through like every stage of grief, and
I've heard of.
Oh, it's so, I think there's a movie about it. It's based on it. Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many books that make me cry.
Yeah, and the English books I've had this year have made me cry. I'm like, because they just, they're dealing with certain issues. I think that's why I'm really glad I realized I had signed myself up last year. When we signed up for classes, we were alone. We had nobody to help us because we were stuck in our homes. So I'd accidentally got myself signed up for a guided English class, which I did not need. I do not need a guided English class. They only call it guided because we have some literacy issues in our district, and so we have some kids who come into high school and they're at like a third grade reading level, and that's why. And so it's like, and so like that focuses on books that I've I know I can read that. Like, she's like, they read a lot of things to you out loud, and it was actually my case manager who noticed it. And she's like, I don't think that's going to be a good fit for you. And I'm like, oh. I'm like, I'm like, I didn't know what she meant. I was like, the teacher is fine. And she's like, no, it's a guided English class. Like, I know it was something that people thought you might need because you have ADHD and stuff, but like, that's not what you need. Like, you don't need that because you're good at reading.
Yeah.
Was it the last question?
Any writing tips?
Yes. Let's see. That's also good. Well, you're both doing what you should be doing now, which is you're reading a lot. I think you become a really good writer, kind of like how a musician becomes practice, but also just reading and reading and reading and reading, and really paying attention to what your favorite books do that you like. Thinking about, not in an English class way, but in like a craft way. Like, well, why did I really like this scene? Like, what was it? The pacing? Like, how did the author take me in? What kind of techniques did they use? Because this is what we do in MFA classes. This is what they do in seminars. it's the same thing. It's just close reading and paying attention, and then also imitating your favorite author. So if you have like a book you really, really love, or a short story or passage, writing your own version of that, whether it's your own characters or their characters, and that's why fan fiction is so great for people learning to write, is imitation. But even if it's not fan fiction, it's like writing kind of a fan fiction version. We did that in my college writing classes. And also just experimenting with writing, like free writing, it's really hard because I'm a perfectionist as a writer, and I will edit as I write, and I'm a nightmare sometimes. But like people think I just sit down and this book comes out, and no. But just sort of giving yourself that freedom and that space to just write whatever comes to mind, or do different techniques. Like for the next 5 minutes, I'm just going to write and not stop. And but reading is really reading inside to the genre you want to write, outside, and you're both already doing that. Like I think you become a strong writer by reading a lot and realize like you're learning, because I think that's how I became a good writer, is I just read and read and read and read and practiced and practiced and practiced as a kid. And I just, I didn't start out as a good writer. Like no one does. Like I started out with interesting ideas, but I was just trying to copy everyone else. But that's how you become good at something. And so, and I enjoy it. I think my biggest writing tip is to just find what excites you. And I have one, because I used to be a writing mentor actually for Girls Right Now, which is like a writing mentorship program in New York City for high school girls. And so one of my things that I would like to do is be like, I would sit with my mentee in like a coffee shop and be like, let's look at this art book, flip to a random page. If you see a photo that inspires you, we'll both write for the next 5 minutes. And actually we did that. And one of the, like for fun that I did became a flash fiction piece that I ended up having published. And it was like things like that your mind has so many ideas you don't even realize. And if you just kind of give yourself an interesting prompt, you'll be surprised at what you come up with. And you'll be like, whoa, I didn't know I could do that.
It's strange for me because my brain comes up with all kinds of things all the time.
Me too.
Like I talk, I'm like, even like, when I'm dreaming, it comes up with things. And like, I talk to my friends a lot about it, but I don't talk to things a lot about it. There's like reoccurring characters in my dreams sometimes.
Same. I have reoccurring dreams.
Yeah, a lot. There's this girl, I don't have a name for her. I call her Faceless Girl because I can never see her face, like ever. Like the dream always finds a way to hide her face, and like the only assumptions I have is that, the only thing I really know is that we live together and we're in some sort of relationship romantically, and that's all I know. And I'm like, I don't know what my brain is doing right now, but it's kind of cool, I guess.
No, I get it. I have a lot of reoccurring dreams. I have a lot of very vivid, and I remember my dreams are very vivid, and I remember them, and I often remember them like years later. Or do you ever have like when you're falling asleep, you think of the dream from the night before? It suddenly comes to you. Isn't that so weird?
Yeah.
Like you weren't thinking of it all day, but as you just suddenly reliving that dream.
Yeah. And see, that's why that's one of the reasons why I signed up for psychology.
Oh, I love psychology too.
Yeah, it's something that I'm taking it next year, and I'm like,
it's
it obviously has a lot to do with it. And I remember one thing, and I'm like, I've never really talked about these dreams that I have with anybody other than friends, and I'm like, and now there are going to be more people knowing about it. Like, my teacher is going to know about it now, and other people are going to know about it. I'm like, I don't know if that, I'm like, it's very interesting.
Surprised at how everyone has the same, like, not everyone has the same dreams, but like, you'd be surprised at how similar people's dreams are, and how like people all have, not everyone, but a lot of people have very vivid dreams and memorable dreams. So psychology is fun. I took that in high school. Those are my favorites.
Whenever I think about like memorable dreams, I think about my brother for years, or a year on repeat. He would talk about the keychain man, and this dude like freaked him out. I'm not even kidding. Like this, he was young he was super young, but like we would be somewhere and he would like look somewhere and be like, what if the keychain man is in there? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, but okay.
No, I actually had similar things, like those little like nightmare creatures from your dreams, and like they just send you into a panic, and you can't explain it to anyone because it's so sort of abstract.
Another thing I think about, I was talking about this earlier this morning with actually the family friends I was mentioning earlier. She has kids, and they're my friends, and their youngest, when she was little, she had like a whole nother family. Like, she would talk about this family all the time. Like, I don't know, it interests me so much. I'm like, because what made this child come up with that? She talked about, like, she's like, my other mom did this. And I'm like, okay.
Like Coraline, my other mother.
Right, that's what we were talking about. We're like, okay. And she's like, and I have like thousands of siblings. And I'm like, oh.
Oh, that's so cute. She's just so imaginative. Yeah, I think a lot of that is like being creative.
Yeah, this was back when she was like super young, and we're like, okay, kid. Yeah.
She's imaginative, and she's writing. She's writing stories.
Yeah,
she's telling you about her imaginary siblings.
And sometimes, these stories that she would tell us were kind of intense. She's like, oh yeah, my two brothers pushed me out a window.
It's funny because she probably doesn't understand the weight of that. She's just like, yeah, and then they tried to kill me, and you're like, what? Yeah. And she's like, what's that? She doesn't really know what that means fully. Like, she just kind of like has heard it or seen it in a show or something, and it's like, yeah.
Sometimes it's really scary. It was like last year she said something about her mom had a headache, and she's like, oh yeah, my other mom says baking soda works. And they looked it up, and they're like, that was something that people would use at home remedies in like the early 1800s. And I'm like,
wait, maybe she has like a ghost family that she talks to.
Yeah, that's what we got into. We were like, you live near an old graveyard. Maybe those guys can.
They live in a graveyard?
No, they live near an old graveyard. They They live like on a river. They live near a river.
Oh my god, that's a good idea for a novel. Like the little girl that can speak to the other family.
Yeah, and I'm like, that is scary.
That's a great horror novel idea. It's so spooky. That graveyard element made it creepier for sure.
Yeah, I'm like, they live near a graveyard that has and it's not a new graveyard. It is an old graveyard. I also live near a graveyard, actually.
Oh, you do?
Yeah,
it's like, just like a family graveyard. My mom was across the road from a Civil War graveyard.
Ugh.
And she's like, I love it. They're the quietest neighbors.
I actually don't know if it's a family graveyard or not, because I never really heard anything about it much.
Yeah. So I wouldn't mind living near a graveyard. It's quiet. I mean, I wouldn't want to like live near one where people are getting buried actively. That would but if it was like a historic graveyard.
Yeah, there probably are a decent amount of families buried there, because I live in quite a small town. I live in a very small town, actually. It's a rural small town, and it's very nice because my closest library is like 5 minutes away. So
there's a young adult novel you might like about rural Maine. And it's called Grit by Gillian French.
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's not like she actually wrote a blurb for my first book, and I loved that book. It was like so and it was so I believe it was rural Maine. It was like there's not many books about rural Maine, and there's not a lot of books about people from smaller towns or like West Virginia. Like there's not the YA doesn't always have that, and so I really like those.
I think when you're in YA, it's a lot of they live in like big cities. They live in LA. They live in New York. They live in I don't know, like Illinois,
or even or they live in Chicago, or even if they live in like a moderate sized city. But it's not a lot of stories about people from rural areas, which is a very specific culture, and depending on the area too. And so I always really like reading those books about specific places.
I don't know, it's kind of a big thing, I guess, kind of here, especially at least in like the communities I am, is like we like to read books from authors who are local. And like it's because I have things, and then I have I always say it was for my book club. It was not for my book club. And I'm but there's an author, Renee, I forget her last name. I just know her first name. She wrote a book called The Bone Cutters.
Okay.
It's a horror book. This my library.
That's a good title.
My school libraries. My school library does events. They have like a calendar outside, and they do like cute little events. And so I went to this one, and it was like, okay, we actually got to meet the author, which I thought was really cool. And then this is it's a horror book, and it's really creepy because it takes place in like a recovery clinic, and it's so weird because
I'm already creeped out by the title.
Yeah. And like basically within the first, like, we got to kind of read the first chapter, and basically the concept is like these guys like cut themselves open in certain spots, and then they scrape at their bones.
They don't like really visceral horror.
Yeah, they don't. No, they didn't describe it, but like what?
But your imagination can take like that's the thing. They don't need to describe it.
But what basically it was like this girl. This girl is not a bone cutter. She sits there, and they're like, and then these people who are all around her. She describes all these scars that they have, and they're kind of like all staring at her because they're like, oh, she has fresh bones.
Oh my god, this sounds terrifying. Like, I'm not easily creeped out, but like this sounds disturbing.
Like, even from the first chapter, I was like, this is disturbing, but it's fun.
And this is a local author, you said?
Yeah, she lives down in like southern Maine.
I want to look up this book. I'm intrigued.
And it was creepy. And it was fitting because it was a Halloween thing. So
yeah.
But it was just like
yeah. Would you recommend it?
I mean, I only read the first chapter, but from what I've read, from what I've read, I was intrigued, and I was like, yeah, it would be an interesting thing to read. But it was like really creepy, and I was like, oh, this is fitting.
It's good for Halloween, but sometimes you're like, all right, that's enough for now.
Yeah. And so it was just kind of.
I'm gonna look it up though. That sounds interesting. It's an interesting premise.
It was, it was kind of. It was a little freaky, but it was, and like the author was reading it to us, and then we got, we got to ask some questions too, and so it was a very interesting thing, and like, it was very interesting to hear about how she like came up with the concepts for it and stuff.
Yeah. I love going to those like readings where the author explains their process and how it's really interesting, and it's more fun when you either have read the book or they read some of it to you and you're like, it's like kind of like when you learn about something in school, then you go to the place, it's way more interesting.
Oh yeah. I think every time I think about something like that, it's when I was in 8th grade, we did A Midsummer Night's Dream for our school play. And I wasn't in it at the time. I would join drama, and then I would do tech crew. And so, but we had kids who were on our school had teams. Our middle school had teams, and they would separate us into these teams, and they were all named after mountains in Maine. So I was on Bradbury, and then I had a friend who was on like Whitecap. But basically,
that's kind of cool.
These kids,
it's like summer camp.
Yeah. These kids from another team, their teacher had them doing A Midsummer Night's Dream in English. And then when we were doing it, they were like, it's so much easier to understand it now that we're actually doing it and just not reading it. Like, and I found that interesting.
Yes, exactly. Because the plays are meant to be acted out. That's why it's hard to read Shakespeare plays just reading the play.
And that's why, like, in English class, when they would teach us Romeo and Juliet, they would show us an actual one instead, which was, like, hard last year because they literally had to, leave a link somewhere. They're like, this is where you can find a free screening of it because I cannot come to your houses and show it to you individually.
Yeah.
And it was actually, I think it was harder last year because she likes the English teacher that I was with likes to have us act out the stuff.
We did that. We did that in high school. It was actually really helpful because we were like, oh, this is how it's supposed to sound.
Yeah.
And this is what it's supposed to be like.
Yeah. And so it was a very interesting thing because we didn't get to do that because it was Corona and everything.
Yeah. Everything's terrible.
It was also sudden. We didn't know what we were doing.
Right.
You know,
it's
this
so
year,
hard.
luckily, we didn't.
It was
so
plays.
hard. I felt so bad because we had a student teacher with us that at that time, and she, her time got cut short, and she was so nice. I miss her.
Aww.
Like, I think about it, and I'm like, oh, I really miss her. Like,
it's so hard when like teachers you love leave or staff members, and you you're so used to them.
And I'm like, I know she was only a student teacher, but like,
still you liked her.
Yeah,
she was gonna become a full-time teacher at some point.
Yeah, and so I was sitting there, and I was actually the other day, and so my English teacher last year was this family friend that I've mentioned before as an English teacher, and I was sitting, and so at the end of the day, when we're in school, I go to her classroom because she can, get me to wherever I need to go, whether it's vocal lessons or I have to stay at her house a little bit till my mom can come pick me up. And I was looking at, and she has like this candy jar that she'll use to give out like, rewards if you got an answer right. And like she had changed it from what it was before. And I'm like, oh, you got a new one? And she's like, oh yeah, the student teacher gave me that. And I'm like, oh. And then that made me miss her.
Aww. That would make me want to get everything right. I'd be like, where's your candy? Yeah. That's a good incentive.
And like, I mean, and she was, and I'm like, I just miss her. She was great. She was part of the book club too. So I was
do you have her email?
No.
Oh, I wonder if there's a way to reach out to her and just be like, thank you, I miss you, I hope you're doing okay. Because then she'd really, if there was a way, she'd love to hear from you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm like, kind of, and like it made me feel bad for her because I'm like, we had to close down, and you were like, she was like halfway through her.
Oh yeah. Is she in grad school?
I'm not sure where she was.
Probably getting. She might have been getting her master's in education and doing. Like
I think she was because, and I'm like, this year they have student teachers too. And like obviously she was graduating, so she wasn't going to. But like I'm like, it's just we know what we're doing this year. I feel.
Well, I really hope that you both can get vaccinated as soon as possible, and I'm cautiously optimistic that by the fall things will be mostly normal-ish. Not 100% because it's globally, it's
obviously,
but I think in terms of the U.S., I'm hoping that because in New York with people getting vaccinated, our infection rate's dropping a lot, and it's helping a lot. And so I think that hopefully in the fall things will be more in person, and then next year definitely things will feel more normal.
I think ours are here too. I'm not quite too sure though, because I haven't really been paying attention to it. Both of my parents are fully vaccinated, and so are my grandparents actually.
It's the best feeling. I'm so worried about my parents.
And grandparents are both fully vaccinated, which is great. We're hoping to get back to normal. They're like, nobody's going to want to be doing online school next year.
No, it's so the teachers hate it. It's challenging. It's like impossible. And not everybody has access to internet, broadband, high quality, high speed. Not everyone has a quiet place to get online. Like some people live in a very noisy, crowded house or apartment, and it's like they might have like younger siblings and they can't concentrate. That's why you go to school. And some people's parents work full time, and so you can't have it's been such a difficult adjustment. I mean, I'm cautiously hopeful things will be better quite soon.
And so even here in my school, we were doing okay until we decided to go back 5 days a week. But
Yeah.
The reason we're kind of closed down now is partially also, it's more of a parent's fault than it is the school's fault, because what I've heard is like she was like, my friend was texting me and telling me that there was a kid in my in her gym class that told me he got tested on the drive to school. So these parents got their child tested, and we're like, oh no, it's fine if we still send him to school without the results.
Was it a rapid test or a PCR?
I don't know what kind of,
probably a rapid.
I don't know what kind of test it was. They were like, the point was like they did it before they went to school, and then they didn't wait for it to get the results.
Yeah, and people do that people will do that a lot too. Like adults do that.
Like you don't know if you're safe yet. Like,
yeah.
I'm lucky enough that I only had to do it 2 times. I've only had to get a COVID test 2 times ever. And one time was because I was going in to Boston Children's because I had an issue with my leg.
Mm-hmm.
That is a long story. But it was just basically something I was born with, and then all of a sudden it just started to cause me problems again.
Yeah.
It's much better now because I'm on meds. I'm glad. So, and then the second time I woke up one morning and I just felt terrible. My throat was sore.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I did it, it was only like a throat swab. And then the second time I did it, I actually had to do it up the nose. It was not corona that time. I had a swollen lymph node and it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That still sucks. Yeah, because there's other viruses too. Like there's cold and flu viruses
and people, it's funny because people who don't, I have family who don't think masks work, and then at the same time they'll go posting and they're like, my child hasn't gotten a cold yet this year, and I'm like, I wonder why that is.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Thank you for coming.
I'm glad we got to chat and not just talk about the book. Like I always love just having a conversation. It was like a podcast almost. It was fun.
Yeah.
I'm really like honored you both had me. I think this is the first blogger interview I've done. Definitely the first virtual one. Like I've answered questions, but it's never been like on video.
Yeah, this is the first one I've done too.
You should do more. You're great at this. You're both great at this.
Luna's done it before though.
I've done it like 4 times.
And I was like, I'm like, I get extremely nervous meeting new people, and I'm like, I'm gonna invite somebody. Like, I'm gonna ask her, but I'm gonna invite somebody. And then I found out Luna had an arc, and I was like, you know what? I'll invite her. Because
I'm so glad you invited me.
Yeah. So I'm like, I know she's done some of this before. And then also, she's read it. So I'm like, she'll enjoy doing this with me. So
yeah, you both did really well. You didn't seem nervous at all. Very professional.
And so, I love, and I think part of it was like, I love listening to podcasts, and
me too.
The only podcast I can really, like, I can focus on podcasts, but only if I really want to. I listen to a podcast. This is the only podcast I've only ever been able to, like, sit still through a whole episode and, like, listen to everyone. It's called, I keep wanting to call it Dear Future Producer. That's not what it's called. That is the book they wrote. It's called The Cool Kids Table, and it focuses it a lot on theater and TV people. And it's hosted by Maggie Stiggers and Spiro Marcos, and it's just such a fun show to listen to because
I should look it up.
Yeah, I always almost get the name wrong because they wrote a book that I'm reading right now, and it's called Dear Future Producer, and every time I go to say it, I'm like, no, it's not that though.
It's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I had so much fun talking to both of you. Like this hour kind of flew by.
Yeah.
Did you have any more questions?
I think that was all.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. And if you ever want to do something again, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Whether it's for this book or another book or any topic, Yeah, I'd love to. Good luck with your, please do more of these. You're great at this.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.